Welcome. So glad that you could join with us as we are in our second session in this mental health module. My name's Matthew. I'm going to be the host tonight. I am not the expert on this. That's Wayne. He's going to introduce himself in a moment. For me, I'm the pastor here at Westside Fellowship Church, and it is just a privilege to know Wayne, to be able to lean on his expertise for this module. And it's going to be great. Tonight, if you aren't aware, we are talking about depression. And depression is a very big topic. I know it's a hard one to sometimes talk about, which is why we want to have these conversations. We want to remove that stigma. We want to allow people to feel more freedom in talking about mental health topics and subjects. And we also want to provide ways that people can help themselves or seek out help, as well as support and try and provide some insight to family members and friends as they connect with friends and family who also have depression. I know I was looking at some statistics earlier today, and according to a number of different health organizations, they're saying that about 1 in every 20 to 25 people struggle from depression. And basically what that means is that each and every one of us either knows someone who struggles with depression or we ourselves struggle with it. And so that is a very a big thing. In fact, one health organization I looked at said that depression is the most common and the greatest disability on the planet at this time. And so it's not something to be ashamed of. It's not something that we should try and sweep under the rug and ignore. It's something that we need to talk about, something that we need to address and deal with and recognize that it's not a right or wrong thing, that it's something that we should look down on people, but it's something that we should walk beside each other and try to help each other and build each other up. And so I'm really excited about tonight's topic. I have friends and family members who wrestle with depression. And so I know I'm going to learn something new. And I'm really excited to hear from you, Wayne. So Wayne, why don't you quickly introduce yourself, and then we will jump into what we are going to talk about tonight.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Matt. My name's Wayne. I'm busy doing my master's in counseling. So I'm busy in the second part of my practicum at the moment. So yeah, so it's almost there. It's very interesting, but yeah, and just thank you for the opportunity to speak about mental health as well. A big part of mental health, and even from a counseling perspective, is education and to help people understand what is happening, because there are so many misconceptions or different ideas, and just sort of understanding what it's about is already a big step towards addressing sort of mental health issues. So yeah, being able to speak about depression tonight's a real privilege. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Wayne. We are really excited and looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Before I turn it over to Wayne and what he wants to share with us, I did want to run through a few things. First of all, we are using a very basic version of Zoom. And so please, what we've done is we've muted everyone except for Wayne and myself, not only to keep things simplified, but also to allow our participants to remain anonymous. We are recording this conversation and we will be sharing it on our YouTube channel. But don't worry, if you are participating, no names will be mentioned. Everyone will remain anonymous. But in that, everyone's microphones are muted, everyone's video is turned off. However, we do want this to be interactive. And so if you have a question that you would like to ask Wayne, what you can do is use the chat function. If you're not familiar with Zoom, typically it's down at the bottom of your screen. There's a chat button that you can click on. I have set the chat function so that you can only chat with myself. Nobody else will see your questions. Again, it's completely anonymous. And then while we are going through the conversation, either when it's relating to what Wayne is talking about or when he takes a break, I will ask your questions to Wayne, again, not mentioning your names. And so that way you can ask your questions, Wayne can answer them, and it can be a little bit more interactive and allow people to get some personal input into their own personal struggles or in what they've recognized in another family member or friend. So hopefully that makes sense. Just wanted to make sure I covered all of the bases. I think that's everything. And so I am going to turn things over to Wayne as he talks to us about depression.
Okay, thanks, Matt. I'll quickly share the screen here. Give me a sec from the beginning. Okay, there we go. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about depression. So the first question that sort of pops to mind is, what is depression? And this is really an important question because a lot of us might think that we know what depression is, and all of us will have, experienced being depressed. There's situations that happen to us, experiences that cause us to be depressed. So we know what it feels like to be depressed. So, that you're feeling down, your mood is down, you don't want to do something, something has really affected you, it's sort of knocked you sort of out of kilter or out of balance a little bit. And then, we say, yeah, okay, I can recognize myself that I'm depressed. And we all experience that. So if we look at the first one there, sort of normal mood lowering, that is what that sort of is referring to, that we all experience times when our mood goes flat or goes down, and we can say, okay, we are depressed. But tonight, what we're going to do is look a little bit more closer at what abnormal mood lowering is. So looking at what major depression or clinical depression, what that looks like. So with normal mood lowering, what normally happens, you'll feel depressed, your mood will be down, but it might last a day or two, and then you'll be okay again because things happen. You sort of deal through the difficult situation, and your mood will go up again. But when it becomes sort of abnormal mood lowering, to the extent where there's a loss of function, so you're so depressed, it doesn't go away. It's starting to affect the way you think. It affects what you do, your behavior, your emotions, all kinds of things that starts getting affected, and it does that on a long term. So it's not just a day or two. This carries on, and you never get a break from it. That is when we're sort of looking at abnormal mood lowering with a loss of function. And that is especially what we're going to look at tonight. And that is what is called, as I said, major depression or clinical depression. So I want to show you this slide. And as we go through this evening and look at different things, I really, encourage you to keep this slide in mind. So this slide is pictures that are taken of a mind that is depressed versus one that's not depressed. And as you can see on the left-hand side with the depressed mind, those yellow parts, sort of brightly lit parts of the brain, those are the functioning parts of the brain. So as it lights up, means that those parts of the brains that's being used. Now, no normal person on the right-hand side, you'll see that there's a whole lot more of that yellow parts that are lighting up. So the different parts of the brain is engaged, you're sort of processing things of different parts. There's a lot more going on. Whereas with a depressed person, it literally is dark almost in their brain, if I can use that word. So again, depression, major depression, clinical depression, it describes a physical state of being. It's almost like somebody having a broken leg or having a physical injury that, you can see it in their body that there's, that something isn't the way it should be. And that is very much the case with a major depression or clinical depression. And this is, and we'll talk about it a little bit later as well, but maybe this is a good opportunity to mention that when a person is suffering from depression or struggling with depression, and people say, oh, you should just snap out of it, or just do something, or, some form of advice in that way. It is almost akin to telling a person who's got a broken leg, well, you should just run to the shop quickly, or you should, why don't you just hop around or something like that. And part of that is because we do not understand what depression is. So, it could be a person could be well-meaning when they say that to another. But hopefully when you sort of see this picture and get this picture in your mind of what's going on in a person's mind, you'll understand, you know, what is going on with depression is quite serious. It's very serious, and the person can't help themselves. You know, it's a state of being, almost, if I can use that word. And this is what's happening inside their body. Okay, so important first question to ask is what can lead to depression? Again, because I think that the danger is that, you know, sometimes we can view people who are depressed and say, oh, you know, it's their fault. You know, they should just look at life positive. It's sort of the half cup full versus the half cup, you know, is my cup full or half empty? And, you know, you should just be positive and see your cup as half full. So what leads to depression? So family history definitely plays a part. That comes from two, you know, it can happen in different ways. First of all, growing up in a family where there is depression, it gets modeled to a child. It becomes something that they see or, you know, get used to. But there's also the genetic part of it. So again, if you think of that picture of the brain, that if a person is depressed, that genetic predisposition towards depression can be passed on to children. So some people are just more susceptible to depression than others. In other words, that their brain might not function as, you know, as it should. Physical health, it's interesting. Heart disease, I put that one there specifically. I think they sort of look at figures and say that if you have a heart disease or problems with your heart, you have a 50% chance of becoming depressed. Again, it is the 50% chance of becoming depressed if you have a heart disease. And again, it's not something that you're doing. It's just how your body physically works. That if you have problems with your heart, you become really susceptible to this depression. Stressful life experiences. Again, stressful life experiences has a very definite effect on our brain and how it works. So stressful life experiences will affect a person just in how they think about things, about themselves, but it also has an effect on the brain and how the brain functions. Early losses of a loved one, that can be either death or divorce. That also makes a person more susceptible to depression. Trauma, especially during childhood, if it's abuse, things like that. Again, it can lead to depression. Again, think of the brain. When trauma happens, there's certain things that take place in your brain as well. It's not the child or the person experiencing the trauma is not making a decision not to function properly. It's a traumatic experience. It is like a breaking of a bone. There's something that happens, and depression can be a result of it. Seasonal affective disorder, I mentioned that one, especially for us here in Canada. It's a very real thing. Again, it's a biological thing. You're not getting sunlight. You're not, you know, your body reacts to it, and some people are more susceptible, and parts of their brains is not functioning as it should, and that can cause depression. Drug or alcohol use, again, if they look at studies and things like that, drug or alcohol abuse has a definite effect on your brain and how your synapses you know, connect to one another, and how your neurotransmitters sort of fire off and things like that. So again, it's sort of like a biological thing, but that's what takes place. So yeah, that's some of the things that lead to depression. I think it's also just important to mention there that it's seldomly one thing that will lead to it. It's often a sort of a combination of different things of these that take place that will lead to that. Stress is just stress is a big part of that. So if a person is struggling, you know, with seasonal affective disorder, but they also have a lot of stress at work or stress in the family or other stresses, then it just sort of compounds, and then that will lead to to clinical depression. So again, just some of those, you know, things that can lead to depression. Yeah.
Wayne, I'm looking at this list and I'm going, a lot of these things are just common, right? I mean, we all have stress in our lives. Yeah. I'm guessing none of us are as physically healthy and fit as we would maybe like to be. Many of us have lost a loved one. Many of us have maybe gone through minor traumas or larger traumas, or we're all going into winter here. Obviously, this doesn't guarantee that you'll get depression. What is the key? Is it to, you know, minimize these things, to try and lessen them, or work through them and not allow them to linger, so that, is longer exposure to these things going to make it worse?
Yeah. Matt, is exactly what you said. I think that the big part of this is to sort of become aware of these things, to be educated on what this looks like. Because unfortunately, often when people come for help with depression, it's not that it's too late, but it's almost, it's really taken full effect on their lives, and that brain parts has really sort of shut down to a big degree. So as we look at these things, as you say, we all have them to one extent to another. Obviously, some people more than others. But as we are aware of these things, we can go, you know what, these are the warning signs that go off. And how do we approach this, and how do we sort of counter these and say, it's not just about taking a pill, or it's not about, this or that, but to say, what do we really do to take care of ourselves? And I think that, when we speak about self-care and the next session, that really comes through strong in that. So as you say, we do experience these things, but if we ignore this and we just think, we can just run and it'll just go away by itself, it very seldomly does. So as we recognize these things, to address it. Yeah. Thanks. Signs and symptoms. So again, we're talking about major depression here. So when they look at major depression, normally they'll look at 5 of these symptoms. So a person who is struggling with depression from a clinical perspective would experience at least 5 of these, and it would be for a period of 2 weeks or longer. I'm just mentioning that's sort of the clinical description of it. So if you see a psychiatrist or somebody that, if they sort of ask and go through these things, that's what they're looking for. Feeling depressed most of the day. Again, it's not the person's fault. You've seen that picture of that brain. Things are shut down. So the person just feels depressed. They can't will themselves to be happy. They're just down. So they feel depressed most of the day. Loss of interest in most regular activities. Again, person's mood is down, it's flat. Things are just not meaningful to them in the way they used to be, because even if they do them, it's not lighting up the brain in any way as such. The pleasure centers or however that works, regular stuff just seems dull. Significant weight loss or gain, that's a sign as well.
That's an interesting one, because I know some people will be like, oh, wow, you're looking great, you've lost weight, and yet it's actually a negative sign, or it could be a negative sign.
Could be, yeah, no, exactly. And I think it comes to bear because of, with food, not wanting to eat because you're just listless and or maybe eating a lot to try and sort of counter the mood of being down. So then sort of that idea of comfort food or something like that. So but you're right. It's sort of what's on the outside can look okay, but what's actually going on is, it's a warning sign. Sleeping a lot or not being able to sleep. And this is a big part of self-care as well. If you're not getting enough sleep, or, it really has a sort of a knock-on effect to mental health in general. So sleeping a lot or not being able to sleep. Slowed thinking or movement. Again, think about that picture that we saw in the beginning with the brain. All parts of the brain isn't functioning. So you can expect that a person will be maybe not as fast in their thoughts as they used to be, or their movement, because the brain isn't working at 100% capacity. Fatigue or low energy most days. Feelings of worthlessness or guilt. And this is a difficult part of depression, is the feelings that a person goes through, because they recognize what's going on in their lives. They feel these emotions, but it's like they can't do anything. It's almost like they're trapped inside a place where they don't want to be, but there's nothing they can do about it. And then those feelings of worthlessness or guilt will come, and it's like, oh, but I should do better. And then when a person, well-meaning, might say, oh, you should just snap out of it, that will just make that even worse. Hopefully that makes sense. Loss of concentration or indecisiveness. Again, think of that picture. The brain isn't functioning 100 on all cylinders, so that leads to that. Recurring thoughts of death or suicide. So depression is a serious condition. People take their own lives because of depression, because the hole becomes so deep and so dark. There's no way out of it, and it could end up in suicide. So it's.
Wayne, last week when you were talking about anxiety, you
Mm,
talked about that like destructive cycle of
mm.
how you start worrying about the future, and then it makes you act a certain way, which then increases your worry, and it's, you know, cyclical. I see a lot of these things as being cyclical as well. Is that accurate?
It is, exactly. And a lot of that is because of the way that we start talking to ourselves and the way we view ourselves. So a person who is struggling from depression, you know, some of these factors might come in. And in the beginning, they might try to fight it or try to change it. But because there's something physically happening in their brain, they can't. And then that sort of self-talk. And then they feel even more down and shut down even a little, and even more, become less motivated to address these things. And as you said, it's cyclical, and the depression gets worse and worse. And again, as I said, unfortunately, often when people come for help, the cycle is almost at the bottom of the, you know, bottom of that cycle. I don't want to use the word pit, but almost, you know, down there when they come for help, because they've tried things, they've done different things, doesn't work, they're really feeling down. And yeah, so exactly, it's as you said, it's a knock-on effect. Yeah. Okay, treatment of depression. So a lot of the treatment of depression will try to address what's happening in the brain. So a lot of how we sort of understand what happens with depression from a scientific perspective, we'll look at that. So they'll look at the brain and see that there's certain parts that are shut down, that is dark, and say, okay, how can we light up the other parts of the brain again? Because if we can light that up and get those parts of the brain to work again, the depression will lift. You know, because your brain will be functioning in a normal way again. So medication that they use is geared towards that, to try and sort of, I've wrote it down here, aims towards neurotransmitters. Sorry, the word sort of doesn't want to roll off my tongue. And correct the imbalances that take place with neurotransmitters. Because if they do that, if they can fix that, then other parts of that brain will start firing up, and the depression will lift. So that's what medication tries to do. It does have side effects, you know, there's some of that. Sometimes the medication itself can cause depression. I mention this because, again, one should know, you know, what goes on. But medication is effective for about 50% of people. So just because you're going to take medication doesn't mean it's going to work 100%. Okay, those parts of the brain is going to fire up again. Things are going to be great. Unfortunately not. You know, it works for 50% of people, but that's generally the idea. So again, trying to get that brain to function the way it's meant to. Electroconvulsive therapy, I want to just put that in there again, because I think a lot of people don't really understand what happens with electroconvulsive therapy. So talk about that. So what happens with electroconvulsive therapy, it's very slight shocks that they send in. And putting it really simply, it's almost like they want to reboot the brain. So it's like, you know, when you push a restart on your computer because it's hung, you know, or the blue screen or things like that, you push the restart and then hopefully it'll come back and everything be okay. So electroconvulsive therapy has been shown to actually cause those parts of the brain that are dimmed or shut down to start working again and to light up again. So that's the whole idea behind electroconvulsive therapy, and it's shown to be effective. It's a pretty safe form of treatment. There is memory loss concern and things, you know, so there are side effects and things like that, but it can be really helpful to a person who is struggling with depression. And again, as we look at these things, again, remember, depression can lead to a person, you know, it can lead to suicide. It can, you know, so it is something that a doctor or a psychiatrist or counselor would, you know, that it's taken seriously. So to try and say, okay, how can we help? You know, how can we get the brain to function properly again? Counseling also helps. Counseling is trying to encourage people to do things or think about things that can help them use different parts of their brain, or, you know, again, try to light up those parts of the brain. A lot of part of, you know, counseling as well, for a person to realize that they're not alone, that there is somebody there that can help, you know, that people care, you know. So counseling has been shown to be effective as well. Light therapy, again, I just want to throw that in with seasonal affective disorder. So there are specific therapies that aimed at that. that can help a person when they find, when it becomes winter and it's these long dark nights. Find out about it. There's therapy, there's things that can be done that can help. Again, it lights up the brain and things are better. Other approaches, there's also other approaches. It's interesting. Faith is one of them. A person's faith is a strong motivator. It can really help a person to become better. There's different other ones as well that, if you look on the internet or ask different people that can give you, more information about that. But so just in general, a little bit about, the treatment of depression and what that might look like. Again, keep in mind, if a person breaks their legs, they put a plaster of Paris on. It's 6 weeks, they got a crutches. There's a process of healing that takes place. It's the same with depression. It's a process of healing. It's, again, not just snapping it out. And often what happens with depression, with the person's brain coming to that place where it's not lighting up, it takes place over a considerable amount of time. Often many, many years before, for that to take place. So the treatment sometimes can take quite long as well. So just to keep that in mind as well.
You mentioned medication is about 50% effective. I'm guessing some of the other ones have different rates of effectiveness as well. Kind of like you mentioned, comparing it to a broken leg, how somebody might need a cast, need crutches, maybe even physiotherapy. Would most people then approach depression using multiple tools to try and make sure, like medication and counseling, or some of them together to try and increase odds of being successful?
I think a majority of people will go the medication route because there's easier access to a doctor, a family physician that can prescribe the medication. Psychiatrists to a lesser degree, and counseling even to a lesser degree, because there's extra costs that are involved in that. Unfortunately, counseling is not part of the medical, our free medical care. So I think a lot of it starts with medication, but as I said, it's about 50%. I think counseling on its own, if I remember correct, is about the same number, but if you combine the two, it goes to about 75%. So again, a combination is good, so if a person can use more than one, then it actually, statistically is a better chance of an outcome,
Right, but sometimes access and costs can be a hindrance in keeping people from that.
No, exactly.
Okay.
Okay. So coping with depression, if a person is sort of, mentioned that some of those symptoms to look at. So if a person is struggling with depression, or maybe somebody who has gone through an episode of depression and has come out of it, because that happens as well. So people, will struggle with depression. They'll get help. It passes, and then maybe 5 years later or 6 years later, they might all of a sudden find, oh gosh, I'm going down that rabbit hole again, or that's happening again. So, sort of coping with depression, not just coping with it, but also thinking about this as a preventative way of helping. So reach out and stay connected. Again, I say these things that they sound very simple, but again, remember, a person struggling with depression finds it really hard to reach out and finds it really hard to stay connected. And so we can say that, and I can put it out there and mention it, but it's hard. But again, just to encourage, and especially if you find maybe at the beginning stages of it, stay connected with people. Don't withdraw, reach out to people. Do things that make you feel good. Again, when a person does that, that'll help lighten up parts of the brain that wouldn't, if a person is just staying in that sort of depressed state. So do things that make you feel good, because it uses different parts of your brain, it lifts your mood, it helps, the way you see yourself as well. Do things that make you feel good. Get moving, sort of a simple one, but if you think, oh, I might want to do this thing, then do it. Don't wait too long. Almost, use a 5-second rule. If you think about it, okay, let's see if I can get it going in the next 5 seconds. Not quite like that, but I'm just saying, get moving. Do the things that you think to do.
The things that make you feel good. You're talking about healthy things though, right? Not like the drug and alcohol use and those things that you said don't use, right? You're talking about healthy things that make you feel good.
Exactly. Like reading. If you enjoy reading, read. If you enjoy art, draw something. It's, yeah, but like you say, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because as I was reading as well, people sort of mentioned gambling as one of those. So if you go sort of to a slot machine, yeah, it's going to make you feel good for while you're there, but it's like drugs in general, that the next day it's got a big down on the other side. So you've got an up, but then you've got a huge down on the other side. And as a person struggling with depression, you don't want that big down. So even if it gives you momentarily relief, the down actually takes away any pros that could come from that. So exactly, just to affirm what you said, yeah, do the things that are constructive. Eat a healthy, depression fighting diet. So this is also very interesting. So there are certain foods that you can eat that will help combat depression. I'm trying to think of them. So for example, omega-rich food like tuna and oyster, what is it? Omega fatty acids. Yeah, that is it. That is good for depression, again, because biologically it helps with certain parts of your brain. So diet, when you're struggling with depression, is not just about eating good foods. It's actually about having a proper diet that is aimed at sort of coping with depression. So read about that. It's more complicated than I just said, but that was just some of the things. Look at your diet, and if you see yourself struggling, get some more information and see what that's like, because they've shown, they've done studies and think that your diet can actually help. Get sunlight. Sunlight helps a lot with depression as well, because of the way that feeling the sun, having the sun on your skin, certain things that it sort of releases in your body, those combat depression.
Along those lines,
yeah.
Obviously winters here in Canada can be very dark, be very hard. You mentioned earlier about those special lights that are like sunlight. I actually know some people who take the approach of going tanning in the winter. Does that actually help with depression, or is that just like a, hey, you look tanned all year long kind of thing, but it doesn't really help?
It will help, because if you're getting that sunshine on you, it's going to be good. So if you're out there skiing and you feel the sun on your face, it does help. It's the physical, actual sun rays hitting your skin. So you're right. It sort of sounds weird, but no, it actually that does help. Yeah. Okay. Challenge negative thinking. Again, it can be so much easier said than done. But being aware of that, sort of be aware of your self-talk and what you say to yourself. And that's where counseling can really help as well, is to sort of challenge that, because sometimes we can get into a place where it's very difficult to challenge that negative thinking. Everything sort of becomes a black or white kind of thinking of viewing things. There's not very few gray areas. And yeah, it's difficult to break out of that patterns, but challenge negative thinking. And again, that sort of reduce stress. Look at things and how they're going. What is it that's causing you stress, and see how you can reduce it. Again, it might sound easier than it is. It's a busy world we live in nowadays, but yeah, look at that. And especially if you find yourself experiencing a lot of stress, try not to take on things that will cause it to increase. So if people ask you to do something, or there's anything like that, learn to say no to a degree, and say, you know what, I've got a lot of, you don't have to say I'm stressful, but just learn to say no. Be aware of your own stress and how much stress and how it's affecting you. So yeah, reduce stress. Okay. Helping a friend or a loved one. Again, this is so important, because as I said right in the beginning, it's so often that depression is misunderstood. And so people with the best of intentions can tell people, give them advice or tell them something, but meantime, they really don't understand what that person is experiencing, what they are going through. And so even though they want to help, they mean the best, but often they can actually make things worse and make the person even feel more depressed, feel guilty why aren't I getting this right? Why aren't I doing this? So, helping a friend, number one, understand the difference between being depressed and having clinical depression. Again, just think of that picture again. That person whose brain isn't functioning fully, where all those parts are dimmed out, that is clinical depression. Being non-judgmental. So again, sort of fits in with, a little bit with the theme in general, is don't think that you know what's going on and therefore can judge a person or say, oh, you should do this or should do that. Don't be judgmental. But an important part of this as well is don't be judgmental of yourself. So if you live with somebody who is struggling with depression, don't go down and feel guilty and say, oh, I caused this. It's my fault that they're not snapping out of it. You know, only if I gave them the right advice, or if I only did this or does that, it would get better. Again, think of that picture. It's a clinical condition that the person is struggling with. It's not your fault. So don't judge yourself. Don't be hard on yourself. Be gentle on yourself as well as on the other person. Self-care, we talked about that a little bit earlier, you know, what we can do to counter depression. But I also want to, again, mention self-care of those who live with people who are struggling with depression. You know, for you to be supportive, for you to, you know, to be there for that other person, you need to take care of yourself. Because again, it can be really difficult, you know, when loved ones are struggling with depression for those around them. So take care of yourself. Do the things that are meaningful to you. Go for walks. Do things that you enjoy. Don't blame yourself. Take care of yourself, because if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't help the other person. So take care of yourself as well. Okay. Be supportive. With depression, so often people feel like they're isolated, that they're not part of the people around them. They're struggling with this terrible thing on their own. So they feel really, you know, on their own. So being supportive is really, really meaningful. Be there for the person. Again, it's not about giving advice, just being there. That fits in with the last one there, sort of where I said love them. I'll just sort of tie that in quickly. Just show them that they are totally accepted for who they are, that it's not the condition that defines them. You know, that they are who they are, and it's much more than what depression is doing to them, so to speak. So don't take things personally. A good example of this is if you go out with somebody, you know, maybe go to a function or a restaurant or something like that, and the person who is depressed just gets up and leave, or says, oh gosh, we got to go home now. It's because of the depression that they feel that the way they do. But often the other person can feel like, why is this happening again? You know, he never wants me to have fun, or she's just being difficult again, and then sort of take it personally when it's not personal. It's just that person that's struggling with depression is really having a hard time. They're struggling. They want to get out of the situation. They're not feeling fine. It's not about the other person. It's about them and what they're struggling with. So don't take things personally. Gentle encouragement to join in activities. Again, it's that part of drawing people in. Don't let them be on their own, you know, but do this gently again. It's not about just saying, oh gosh, you've got to do this, or, you know, if you don't do this, you don't care, or that. No, we do it gently with understanding. Listen. And this can be a hard one, so, you know, because we listen with an intent of giving advice, but sometimes just listen. You don't have to give advice. Just be there. Just listen. And then, as I said, that last one of just love them, accept the people, be there for them. Depression is something that can be cured. I'm going to use the word cured. It's, you know, there are things that can help lift depression. There's ways to get the brain functioning again. That person wants to be functioning as well. They don't want to be depressed. They don't want to be in that place. So, you know, if you love them and accept them as they are, that is really meaningful for that person when they find themselves in that sort of really, really dark place. Yeah, and I think that's that. There's so much more to say, to be honest with you, Matt, but I thought, you know, just sort of stick with those, get that impression of what's going on, and hopefully that can be a sort of a meaningful start to sort of thinking about depression and what that looks like.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you so much, Wayne. If you're done your slides, go ahead and stop sharing your screen. Again, as we've said before, everyone who's here, if you want to ask questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, and I will ask those and direct those towards Wayne. Wayne, thank you so much. A lot of what you shared there at the end, I mean, we all need relationships. We all need people. We all need to be listened to and loved and encouraged and built up. But recognizing that sometimes when we're helping or walking alongside someone who has depression, sometimes they need more, right? They need more gentleness. They need more encouragement. They need maybe more than what we're used to giving. And so that can be challenging for us. And yet, that's what they need. And so how can we step out? How can we be those people who can walk alongside of others and encourage them, build them, lift them up? That's really, really good. I do have a question here. You mentioned in the what can lead to depression section, the family history side of things. And in that, I think the way that you described it was more along the lines of those family experiences, like if there was maybe abuse or something like that. Is there any connection between genetics specifically and depression?
No, there definitely is. There's a strong connection between it genetically, because again, if we think about that picture, you know, your brain and how it fires, how the neurotransmitters work, a lot of that gets passed on. And it's fascinating when you start looking at that. They did some you know, research on people in Holland that went through a famine, because Holland kept really good records. They showed that the effects of that on mental health went down for 3 generations. So you know, for 3 generations, the trauma that they struggled with during that time had an effect on the brain and the composition of the brain for 3 generations. So genetically, definitely. And again, talking about that being predisposed. So some people are more susceptible to it, and you can get that through genetics, definitely. Yeah.
So even though the cause of it was an outside source, it wasn't originally in the person and in their genetics, because of what they went through and they became depressed, they actually passed it on to their kids and their grandkids.
Exactly.
Wow, that's incredible. That is incredible. I have a comment here that it can be tiresome to walk alongside of someone with depression. It can be hard to be supportive all of the time and not feel frustrated by the lack of change in the person. Absolutely. Absolutely. Wayne, I'm sure you want to touch on that.
No, exactly. And I think that's why sort of with the self-care part of it, I really sort of emphasize that. And I think that's also important, again, to look for help. So if you're a supporter, a caregiver, there are support groups, there are people that can help, you know, talk to somebody. Don't carry the load on your own as well. You know, find somebody that can help you through that, because it is. And again, as we said, you know, it can last for years. So it can be really, really difficult. Mm-hmm. But again, just to remember that the depression isn't a person. You know, it's almost like, you know, the depression is that sort of sticks out and that, you know, becomes really, really visible. But if that different parts of the brain, once that starts firing up again, it will be that it'll be a different person that will come forward. It won't be, you know, because of what it's not the depression isn't the person itself. So, but yeah, no, it is. And that's why, again, why there are support groups, you know, for people, because there's a real understanding that it can be really, really hard. Yeah.
Absolutely. Just to touch on that, I was a part of a support group for a number of years, living in a different city. And there's a couple things. First of all, you know, we always said you can't give what you don't have. So just that, you know, reiterating that point of, you got to take care of yourself, right? If you trying to care for someone else is bringing you down, 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 you're not going to be able to help them or anyone else. And so you really got to take care of yourself. But also recognizing that depression is not a person's identity. Is so crucial, right? We can't see someone as, oh, you are depressed or you are the depressed person. It's you are Wayne or you are Matt and you struggle with depression, and we all have struggles and it's just another struggle, but that's not who we are.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's really, really good. Awesome. Thanks. I'm not seeing any other questions right now. I do want to mention one other thing that we had touched on a little bit ago, just in that aspect of, while a lot of people can be more successful getting through depression if they have multiple things happening for themselves, like medication and counseling, or combining some of those things together. I know that sometimes the costs of things or the access to things can just be so overwhelming. And so I think it needs to be stated, and I think people need to know that there are some counselors out there who do charge on a sliding scale based on how much you make. I will mention as well, we here at Westside Fellowship Church, we have a few individuals, of whom Wayne is one of them, who are willing to sit down and chat with people, and we typically do this free of charge. And so if that could be useful to someone, if that could be helpful, we do our best. We can't help everyone simply because of how many people we have and the number of hours that they can give, but we do have that available. And so if you or someone you know and love could use that help, you can always contact our church. You can email us at info@westsidefellowship.ca, or you can look us up online, westsidefellowship.ca, and you can find all of our contact information there. I'm not seeing any more questions or comments, so once again, thank you everyone for joining with us for this discussion on depression. And thank you, Wayne. It has been, again, a great privilege of having you, your expertise, so much incredible information. And again, everyone, this will be recorded. We will be putting it on our YouTube channel, Westside Church. So if you want to go back and watch it again and refresh yourself on a number of these things, you can always do that. Quick reminder, don't forget to join us next Thursday, October 8th, again at 6:30 Pacific Standard Time, as we are going to talk about self-care. And this is going to be just a great time of talking through what it looks like to take care of ourselves, whether you struggle with anxiety, depression, something else, or just if you're somebody who doesn't have those struggles, but you need to take care of yourself so that you can be there for others in your life. It's going to be an incredible discussion. Hopefully you can join with us. Again, that's next Thursday, October 8th at 6:30. Thanks again, and we will see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.